We're starting off with the news that the New York Jets have fired Robert Saleh, a decision that shocked many. Now, I don't think that, again, it's all that much of a surprise that Saleh's job was, on the hot seat and that he was feeling the pressure. The timing of this decision is really what's the most surprising part of it, at least to me, considering the fact that, yes, the Jets are coming off of 2 consecutive really bad losses. In each of those games, though, it was really more so on the offense still struggling to find their own. And while Robert Saleh's background is defense, that's more so what his specialty is. And that is important to note. I do feel like there's also the fact of the matter that as a head coach, you sort of surpass just having one sort of backbone of you're only responsible for the defense. He, along the way, had very bad quarterback play. So you can absolutely make the argument that he was sort of set up to fail from the first place, and I wouldn't argue all that much there. But the other part of this is the fact that Saleh hasn't really proven that he is a good head coach yet. There was obviously the piece that came out last year, I think it was from The Athletic, that talked about all of the dysfunction going on behind the scenes with the Jets, Saleh not really having good control over the locker room and specifically the mishandling of that quarterback position once Aaron Rodgers went down. Again, not saying that that's his fault. That is an unfortunate event that Saleh sort of had to try and overcome, and he did a fine job doing so. The fact that the Jets were at least still competitive in 2023. But all that being said, there were points along the way where Saleh could have established himself as a really good head coach. I just don't think he ever lived up to that. Again, you can make the argument that there was a lot that went against him throughout his tenure, and I would 100% agree with you. And the biggest thing that went against him, frankly, is the fact that the team invested so heavily into Aaron Rodgers. And while it is definitely an upgrade at the quarterback position versus what they used to have, there is a certain risk reward with bringing in Rodgers at that point in his career where he was entering his age 40 season, was coming off of a pretty disappointing campaign in 2022 where the Packers missed the playoffs. And I do think that there, again, a little bit of a risk reward situation where Rodgers does provide so much leadership, I guess, in his own sense. He's not what I would define as a prototypical leader on the football field, but a lead by example guy for sure, and somebody who knows how to win definitively, and because of that, the locker room trusts him. But that being said, he hasn't really lived up to the bill that the Jets paid up to this point. And when I say that getting Rodgers was so detrimental to Saleh, it was because of the fact that it was really no longer Robert Saleh's locker room. And he didn't help himself along the way. I do think it was definitely a misstep from Saleh to talk about the cadence thing that occurred a couple weeks ago where he kind of pinned some of the blame on Aaron Rodgers for his cadence, that it was leading to extra false start penalties. That's a situation where I feel like a little bit more it's Saleh, stay in your lane. Because, again, Rodgers does have the ultimate respect because he is certainly going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. That being said, though, it is a little bit of a blind leadership to Rodgers, and that stemmed from the top of the organization where they go in and they hire Nathaniel Hackett, Rodgers' former quarterbacks coach, as his offensive coordinator. Hackett coming off of what was an embarrassing, frankly, head coaching stint with the Broncos, and at this point now I think it was 2022. And you bring in Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb and some familiar faces for Rodgers that you're just kind of setting the tone from the front office down, that this is an Aaron Rodgers-led team through and through. And that's not a bad thing necessarily because, again, the process of winning, Rodgers is familiar with it. And that's where I think Saleh at times maybe it's again, very tough position for him to be in to try and maneuver, still being the head coach of that locker room while also not undermining Aaron Rodgers or sort of stepping on his toes by any means. So again, very difficult across the board for Saleh. I do feel like we knew that there was a very real possibility that he was eventually going to be fired. I feel like if the leash was going to be this short, just part ways with him in the offseason. I'm not really sure what they waited around for, and truthfully, I don't really know how beneficial this move is for the Jets moving forward, where if Saleh was so bad behind the scenes and the locker room just wasn't bought into the vision whatsoever, I guess you do sort of have to cut ties there, because if you're going to get an unmotivated football team stepping on the field for you on a weekly basis, you are not going to win games that way. But like I mentioned, while Saleh, I do think, has some responsibility over the offense, that's not his deal, is being the offensive coordinator or structuring the offense. Sure, he has input, I'm sure, in a lot of these instances. But at the same time, that's kind of, the offense is a little bit its own entity. And that's on Aaron Rodgers, that's on Nathaniel Hackett. And the defense, which Saleh does have more of a hand in, has been very effective for the past couple seasons. The only reason the Jets were able to win 7 games last year was because the defense was punching above their weight class so much. And it's a talented, side of the roster there, so I don't know if that's the right phrasing. But the point being that the Jets defense was single-handedly keeping them in games these past couple years. That is at least, a good amount attributed to Robert Saleh and the job that he has done in New York, that now, if Aaron Rodgers plays better these past couple weeks, if the Jets hit the field goal at the end of that Broncos game, if they score any touchdowns in that game, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't throw 3 interceptions, including a pick 6 in this London game, Saleh probably has his job back. The Jets are about to play on Monday Night Football this upcoming week against the Bills with a chance to take the number 1 spot in the AFC East. So this was a couple different ways. Like, I understand things have been really bad. You're playing 2 good defenses the past couple weeks in the Vikings and the Broncos that I give a little bit of a pass to Aaron Rodgers to some degree. I don't really know how that sort of correlates to Saleh has to go now. Again, at least saying this based off of public information, where it doesn't seem like he was incredibly well liked in the locker room. So again, from a morale standpoint, they probably have, some more information as to some of that dysfunction in the Jets organization. But that's where I really do think it just comes back to the Jets from the top down. I mean, Joe Douglas, he is probably just as much on a hot seat. There's really zero benefit to firing your general manager mid-season. So that's not the case, but I feel like he's sort of counting his days in this position. And I mean, moving forward, I think that the Jets have, it'll be nice for them, I suppose, to have a clean slate, to reset the expectations. And this season isn't over, by the way. So I'm going to stop myself right there because of the fact that they are still very much in play. Like I mentioned, they do have a chance to come out, number 1 spot in the AFC East after this upcoming week 6 if they are able to pull off this game against a Bills team that is currently reeling. But I do think that it goes beyond, just Robert Saleh or just Joe Douglas. This is a franchise that has been in turmoil for a lot of the past decade or so. And, again, they're focused on this season right now. It's basically championship or bust for them. I have to imagine that this is going to be Aaron Rodgers' last season. We'll see about that. But either way, I don't really know what the future holds. The Jets understand the stakes are very high for them this upcoming season, which is why I think at this point there's kind of a no-brainer move staring at you on the table, and that is trading for Davante Adams. I don't think that there's really all that much of an excuse. Like I mentioned, this could be Rodgers' last season. They don't have a backup plan at quarterback right now. They don't really have a plan for coach moving forward. It is Ulrich, the defensive coordinator for them, that's going to be taking over. Jeff Ulrich, somebody who the Jets have mentioned at least as somebody they could see as being a future head coach candidate in the future. Whether, I think at the time when they made these remarks, it was, about the Jets position possibly, or across the league. So we'll get to see a little bit more of what's on his plate here. Going to be difficult. I would imagine he's going to continue to hold the play calling responsibilities on defense, but we'll see there. But again, to sort of circle back to the point here, the Jets need to be aggressive in this instance because of all of the unknown and uncertainty that follows after this season. They have to take advantage. And, you fire Saleh because you think that there is a higher upside with this current Jets team that Saleh can't bring them to. That's fine. Davante Adams doesn't solve all of their problems. The offensive line has still been shaky. The run game hasn't been there for them yet. I do think that their offense is very one-dimensional in terms of just targeting Garrett Wilson. That's where you add a Davante Adams where he can at least provide a fix there, and maybe they can at least start to find an offensive identity, because I don't know what that is right now. It's basically just Aaron Rodgers. That is the identity, and they just sort of go as he goes. And that's why in the games where he hasn't been great, they have really struggled on that side of the ball. And when he's played, even better, specifically you're looking at, I'd say, week 2 and week 3 against the Titans and Patriots, that's when we've seen the Jets actually sort of, look like a semblance of a team that has real playoff aspirations, albeit though against 2 of the worst teams in the NFL in the Titans and the Patriots. So Jets have a whole lot more to prove. I do think that they definitely have areas they need to go out and invest into, specifically looking at Davante Adams. I do think there's growth for this offensive line with 3 new starters, and I know it is Morgan Moses that's currently missing time right now, but it would be Olu Fashanu, their first-round rookie, that's currently starting at right tackle for them. So either way, still 3 new starters. They can gel. They can probably step their game up. I don't think that any of their additions in Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses and John Simpson, then you add in Fashanu there, I don't think any of them are bad players. So that offensive line should be playing better than they currently are. But it is with Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett, they have to find a way to create an identity offensively. And they can do that in-house. They can also invest into Davante Adams to try and take some steps forward there. But either way, the current brand of football that the Jets are playing is by no means good enough to be a playoff contending team, let alone a Super Bowl contending team. So we're going to dive back into the Jets, circle back there in a little bit as we do this week's version of the Panic Meter, talking about, on a scale from 1 to 10, how worried should the Jets be at this point. But before we do so, do want to dive into last night's Monday Night Football game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the New Orleans Saints, as the Chiefs remained undefeated, even despite some key losses on the offensive side of the ball. We will be discussing where both of these teams stand entering week 6. But before we do so, we do have to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.